Today on the final episode of the Ten12 Podcast for 2024, our good friend Joe Broback's here to talk about the Big 12 and the transfer portal. Justin Southwell is here to talk about what's going on in Oklahoma State. Joseph of Utah Utes Football Digest updates us on everything going on with Utah. And Justin Hiles of Viva La Cats is going to talk Cincinnati football with us right now.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
Money decisions don't have to be either or. With Bank of America, they can be yes and. Like yes to sunny vacations and rainy day funds. Can our digital tools and guidance help you create the future you want? Yes. And help you keep enjoying today too. Do more with a bank that asks, what would you like the power to do? Explore our tips and more at bankofamerica.com/yes and.
Welcome to the Ten12, the podcast that covers all 16 teams in the Big 12 Conference. We are the flagship show for the Ten12 Network. Find every show on the network at ten12network.com. And of course, we are partners with Sports Social, Europe's biggest sports podcast network. I'm your host, Phillip, and thank you for joining us for our, let's go with second to last episode of 2024. That's just the way this season is going to wrap up. Christmas is almost here. I know we normally do bowl picks, but Chase is busy with newborn twins. I have a lot on my plate, so we're not going to do bowl picks. So picks episodes are done this year. I hate not doing it, but that's how it has to be. We do have one more episode planned. We are planning a beer and Pop-Tart live taste test pairing. Yes, Iowa State is in the Pop-Tart Bowl. That means that we will be doing beer from a brewery in Iowa who has a relationship with Iowa State. We'll have more details on that. That will be live on YouTube. We'll get information out about that on all of our social platforms. 1012 Network on Twitter and Bluesky, 1012 Pod on Threads and Instagram. So find us there. And of course, we're on YouTube. That's where that will go live, is on the YouTube channel. It's 1012 Podcast on YouTube. So where, however you listen to the show, if you want to follow us on YouTube, subscribe, that'd be great. Follow us on a social platform of your choice. And you'll find out more information about that. It was a ton of fun last year with Manhattan Brewing Company and our good friend Scott of Bosco's Boys. Yes, Wide Right Natty Light will be involved in this Pop-Tart and beer live taste test pairing. I'm very excited. Shout out to Levi Stevenson of Wide Right Natty Light, because he helped get this one going, because otherwise I don't know that we would have done it this year. So that's the last thing that we're going to do this year, is that. I'm excited for it as always. We've got a loaded show for you today. This is the last, let's call it just Big 12 sports episode of the season. I got a bunch of guests here on the show. Our good friend Joe Broback. If you've listened to the show before, you know Joe. He does a great job. He's got a lot of great stuff on his YouTube channel. But we're going to talk about the transfer portal with him, some thoughts on it, and the Big 12. We've got Justin Southwell, who covers Oklahoma State for Believe, the Believe Network. We're going to talk about Oklahoma State, state of things. There's been a lot of additional hires for that program since we did the interview. It's okay. It's more of an overall conversation about Oklahoma State after a very disappointing season. Joseph, who covers Utah for the Utah Utes Football Digest, is here as well. Talk about the offseason for Utah. And Justin Hiles of Viva La Cats, we're going to talk about Cincinnati in this one as well. Again, recorded it, and I made a comment that they hadn't made any changes to the coaching staff at all. Now they've made two, both dealing with defensive backfield. Kenny Coombs is gone, and I believe Nate Fuqua as well. So, look, I had to record these. for the few days leading up to when this came out, with an understanding of this is the off season. It's December of the off season. This stuff changes rapidly and quickly. That's okay. It's still solid interviews. So stick around for that. All of it. This drops on the 16th. 10 days to Christmas. If you haven't gotten your order into Charlie Hustle yet, you cannot wait any longer, especially not if you want it boxed and wrapped and under the tree on Christmas morning. And folks, that is a gift that the receiver will be very happy to have. Okay, incredibly comfortable gear. Before I started recording with Joseph, he's like, I got my Charlie Hustle stuff. We made sure he got a couple of Utah things. He's like, I love them. I'd tell everybody. They're so comfortable. They are some of the most comfortable vintage collegiate apparel you will find anywhere. That is important when your team is making you uncomfortable, be it gridiron or on the hardwood or in the spring on the diamond, whatever it is. They've got all 16 Big 12 teams covered with absolutely fantastic gear. They've been dropping new stuff. They've got comfortable sweaters and hoodies and t-shirts. So go to charliehustle.com. Use our promo code 101215, TEN1215. It gets you 15% off all non-sale items. It's the same promo code for every show in the network. So whatever show you're a fan of, maybe you're just checking it out because one of our show hosts are on this one. Maybe you're checking it out for some other reason. Whatever brought you to the show today, go to charliehustle.com, peruse the Big 12 gear. They've got a ton of it, and it's awesome. Use the promo code 101215 for 15% off all non-sale items. Thank you so much to Charlie Hustle for sponsoring the network as a whole in 2024 and the incredible stuff that they have done with the Big 12 Conference. If you haven't seen the Arizona State Big 12 Champs t-shirt, you should. You should go check it out. It's pretty awesome, especially if you're an Arizona State fan. If you're not, I get it. That's okay. Charlie Hustle, vintage made fresh. This has been a great year. I've had a lot of fun with this show, as I do every year. The consistency of episodes in 25 is a little up in the air. My 3 kids keep getting older. We got one in kindergarten. One will be in kindergarten. A second one will be in kindergarten next fall. And so I'm going to do this for as often as for as long as I possibly can. But we're going to take a little bit of a break. I'd say probably close to a month off outside of the beer and Pop-Tart pairing, which is really just drink beer, eat Pop-Tarts, say what tastes good together and what doesn't, and talk about some Iowa State and some Big 12 sports stuff just for fun. But we'll probably take about a month off. So I would expect us back sometime in early to mid-January, dive deep into hoops until softball season gets here, and then a mix of basketball and Big 12 softball. We'll go, and I would tell you I have a plan for next summer, but it's too far away. So, yeah. If you listen to this on Monday, if you were the praying type, we're taking our youngest to get tubes again, get her adenoids taken out. I know it's a little bit personal stuff, but just just say a prayer. Surgery as a parent for your kid, especially with a little, it doesn't matter. Even if it's minor stuff, it's still just like, it's a nerve-wracking thing. I love the show. I love all of you. I owe quite a few of you some koozies and stickers. I've got all your stuff, addresses and stuff ready to go. And as soon as I have a day to sit down and jam pack a bunch of envelopes and go to the post office and mail them out, I will. And I will do that before the end of the year. So I promise you that there's quite a few of you who are going to get them. If you've never gotten one and you want one, hit us up on one of those social platforms I talked about. DM us. Our DMs are open everywhere. So reach out. Let me know. We're in the Wide Right 90 Light Discord. You guys should hop in, whether you're an Iowa State fan or not. It's a ton of fun. It's great to be in there. I'm in a few different Big 12 Discords. I'm rambling at this point. It's already a long pod, so I should probably stop doing that. Thank you to everybody who's listened this year. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to every single host of a show in the network who has entrusted your podcast to me this year. Thank you, everybody who interacts with me and with the accounts on social media. We love it. I appreciate it. Yeah. Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy New Year. Good luck to your teams in every sport and endeavor. Good luck to you in whatever you have planned to end the year or to start the year anew in 25. Reach out to us. Let us talk. I'm happy to chat about whatever. I love making friends, and Big 12 fans are some great people to be friends with. So, again, great list of guests coming up here. Thank you to everybody for this year. We will talk to you again soon on the 1012 Podcast YouTube channel. Otherwise, here on our podcasting platform, we'll talk to you again in 25. Thank you so much. Let's get to it. Look, aside from the coaching cycle, which we'll have to talk about it because I think this is the weirdest coaching cycle of my lifetime with some of the moves that are being made. But aside from that, the buzz is, of course, the transfer portal is open. Players are entering. Players are finding new landing spots quickly. And there's a lot. Like, it is next to impossible to try and cover this whole thing from a conference-wide perspective. Like, you can do it from a team-wide. Trying to do it from, hey, can you keep track of 16 teams and all the players in and out? No, I cannot. No, it's not. I don't have time for that. But someone who has done a decent job of doing things at least similar to that is our very, very good friend Joe Broback, who's joining us again. Joe, welcome back to the show, bud.
As always, thanks for having me. It's always a blast.
Always a good time when you're here. And we want to talk about the transfer portal, and everybody loves to talk about the transfer portal, that crazy, wild thing where more and more players seem to enter every year for, as we like to remind everybody, a variety of reasons, right? It's not just because kids are greedy. It's not just because they want more playing time. There are some, in many cases, it's because the coach said, you should find somewhere else to go play because we don't really want you here anymore. There's lots of different reasons the players enter the transfer portal. So the rule of thumb is to remember that when there's a mass exodus from your rival, it's because they have bad culture and the coach has lost the locker room. And if there's a mass exodus from your locker room, it's because you're kicking out all the kids that weren't living up to expectations and you're going to bring in better players. Is that correct, Joe?
That's factually accurate. That's a very objective way to look at it.
God, perfect opportunity. Okay, so let's talk about the Big 12 here. A lot of names who have entered, some who have started to trickle in as far as commits, and a lot of guys that we're keeping an eye on as far as Big 12 fans and Big 12 teams go. So let's start with the guys who have entered the portal for you. Who are some of the names, or who are some of the guys who you feel by either were the most surprising or are going to be the most impactful losses for their teams this upcoming season or moving forward?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to put some guys on this list. I think you have to look at, your short term, maybe your veterans that are leaving, and then you have certain guys like Mike Hudson's a big one. I think that when he signed with Texas Tech, a lot of people were super excited about that. That it was really a good get for Joey McGuire and that staff. But then as the season progressed, you see, okay, well, he's not really involved that much in the offense. He's not getting as many touches as you might have thought. So him entering the transfer portal wasn't really a big surprise. You have that much talent, you're not utilizing it. Guys are going to see, hey, I can go somewhere else and potentially be that guy, and he's going to get a lot of attention. Another one I had, is Kendall Daniels for Oklahoma State. I think that his experience at linebacker obviously didn't go how Oklahoma State wanted it to go, but he is someone that has, secondary experience, linebacker experience, and, nowadays people are looking just for kind of that experience. Sometimes they all think that they can mold that player and what they want them to be. And, Daniels has good experience coming out of Oklahoma State. So that was a big one for me as well. His teammate, Deshaun Stribling, that's another name to keep an eye on. We'll see where he ends up. And then the other big one that I had is Josiah Trotter out of West Virginia. I think West Virginia, obviously in a little bit of a different place. Rich Rod is taking over. So there's a chance maybe he does come back now that you have that coaching staff, or at least the head coach in place. But Trotter's going to be a big loss for them if they can't get him back for sure.
Looking across the Big 12, I pulled up the numbers after the first day. UCF led all teams with like 21 entries. Arizona was second with 20. Numbers have continued to climb for various teams across the board. And in these players, you get to the numbers and you just look at, okay, they've lost 21 players. Well, how many of those are starters? How many of those were key contributors? How many were expected to have an impact next year? How many are walk-ons? How many are guys who play on special teams only? Looking at all of that and looking at some of the Big 12 teams, which team do you feel like has been hit the hardest? And whether that's from total number or number of impact players, which team do you feel like has suffered the most losses out of the transfer portal?
Yeah, that's a good one. UCF definitely is up there just purely based off quantity. I think UCF's more has to do with when you look at the guys that are entering the transfer portal, there's a good chunk of them that you thought were going to be starters or major contributors, and then for various different reasons just didn't pan out. So I think that part of it is, we're losing 20 plus players, but you're also frustrated because, it's like, okay, well, these guys that we brought in, whether that's from the portal itself or, you recruited them out of high school, just didn't pan out. I think that has to hurt. And then, Gus Malzahn goes to take a coordinator position at Florida State. But I think that also Oklahoma State, some of the players that they lost, you could see that as being some big hits. I don't think anybody was overly damaged too much by the portal. I think everybody kind of had a certain group of players that obviously that hurts. Micah Hudson really hurts for Texas Tech, but I think that staff feels like they still have a good group in place. And also part of that is also going to be who you get in. So yeah, you might lose some key players, but there's obviously a ton of options in the transfer portal. And there's plenty of, Texas Tech's already added 2 players there. They got commitments, I should say, from two players from the FCS level. So they're already working on replacing some of the talent that they lost. So I think that people will evaluate that once everybody's kind of all settled and they found new homes. But I don't know if I think besides UCF and just the quantity, if there's one team that stands out to me more so than the others.
Pulling off of 247's transfer portal, which is really handy. It's not always the most up to date at the minute, but it is a good way to keep track of things. And I will note we are recording this on Thursday, December 12th. So these numbers might be a little bit outdated by the time this drops on Monday. But Arizona currently the lead in the Big 12 with 29 transfer portal entries, which, given the coaching change last offseason and the season that they had this year, that's not terribly surprising to see as a number of players who have entered the portal for Arizona. So that's definitely a team that's going to look very different roster-wise heading into next season. You kind of touched on some of the commits for Texas Tech. Not that many players have committed because the portal's only been technically open for, by the time this drops, a week. But who are some of the guys who have committed so far that you would say are guys to keep an eye on that can immediately come in and make an impact for their team in 2025?
Yeah, I think right now there's 4 for sure, and one other one that I'll touch on. We talked about the Texas Tech commitments. Cole Wisniewski comes in from NDSU. He's a former All-American in 2023 for the Bison. And then, he had an injury that kept him out all of 2024. 6'4", 215 pounds, has good size for a safety. And Texas Tech has had some really good players in terms of good frames and whatnot that have a future in the NFL. So I thought that was a really nice pickup for them. Hunter Sembrano comes in from Illinois State. Illinois State had a pretty successful year in 2024. So getting a lineman like that was pretty exciting for them. Connor Wegman obviously is going to be the big name, the former Texas A&M player, quarterback, who obviously had a rough year, to put it kindly. Just didn't have the year that he wanted, didn't have the confidence. We still saw some flashes from him at times. He's committed to Houston. Willie Fritz is looking to rebuild that program. And late in the season, I thought that they looked pretty fun to watch. Still, obviously, a team that is lacking talent to compete in the Big 12, but you definitely saw some flashes of what that program could be. So getting Connor Wegman to commit, hopefully they can keep him. That's going to be an interesting quarterback to add to that room. Devin Dampier, I think that was an interesting addition by Utah, simply because when you look at, first of all, we don't know if Cam Rising is going to come back or what he's going to do. Honestly, for Utah's sake, I hope he doesn't. I just don't think that needs to be something you do, and maybe he finds a new home. Dampier also adds a different element to that offense that we didn't really see. He's more that athletic quarterback that's going to be able to make things happen with his feet. I honestly thought he was going to follow Bronco Mendenhall to Utah State. So the fact that he committed to Utah was pretty surprising. But with a new coordinator change, that's going to be something to keep an eye on for Utah. Do they kind of switch to a more modern offense? What that's going to look like? How Dampier is used in that offense and what they ask him to do. That's going to be really fun, especially after the season that he had at New Mexico. The one that's kind of under the radar is LaShawn Williams originally committed to Memphis out of the transfer portal from Iowa. Now he's going to Kansas. And with Devin Neal going to the NFL draft, you do need a replacement for him. So that feels like a pretty good fit for him. So that's another name that I had, but there's not too many guys that are committed yet. So this list probably is going to expand, and there's going to be quite a few people that you're going to add that probably will make a big impact that should be on this list.
Utah fans, from what I could tell on social, very, very excited about landing Devin Dampier, and for good reasons. Like the quarterback room is now empty. I mean, Isaac Wilson is entered the transfer portal. Obviously, we don't know what Cam Rising is going to do. I know what I would suggest he do, so that he doesn't end up on a gurney. But landing Dampier feels like a very nice move for them, given what they lost at quarterback and given what he was able to do at New Mexico. That's one of those. It kind of reminds me, and it's what's interesting. It kind of reminds me of the Toledo quarterback who ended up committing to Baylor last offseason. Now, obviously, he got hurt, and Sawyer Robertson has taken over from that job. But from the way we had expectations for what would happen at Baylor based off of that throughout the offseason, this is the same kind of vibe of one of the more talked about G5 quarterbacks who enters the portal off of a really good year, coming into a Big 12 program that's going to offer at least that fan base a lot of excitement and promise heading into next year.
Yeah, for sure. The Finn situation didn't work out. I was honestly, I was kind of a little confused about why he chose Baylor, but right away I thought we saw what it could be. And then injuries always suck. That's just something that always makes it difficult to stomach when you lose a guy like that. But yeah, Dampier obviously had success at New Mexico, which if you can have success in New Mexico, probably feel like you can have success almost anywhere. So we'll see what happens with that. He's got to learn a new system and learn how to do that. But it feels pretty good about what he can do in that new culture.
Who should we be keeping our eye on? And again, this is going to drop on Monday. We're recording this on a Thursday. So there's a very good chance that some of these names that we mentioned here will have chosen landing spots by the time this drops, but we're going to do this anyways. And if it gets super outdated, we'll just cut it. But who are some players that Big 12 schools and fans are keeping an eye on or should be keeping an eye on that might be committing to their school?
Yeah, I think when you have Colorado in the Big 12, you're going to have a wide range of potential commits. So you could have some games that you maybe normally wouldn't consider a Big 12 team, but a guy like Purdue safety Dylan Thieneman going to have a ton of offers. Teams are going to line up for his services, and he is someone that I almost didn't put on this list initially because I just thought that he's not going to the Big 12. But you have certain programs in the Big 12 that can attract a talent like that, Colorado being one of them, but we'll see where he ends up. That's a name to keep an eye on. I think if you're looking at quarterbacks, the two that I had written down, Preston Stone out of SMU, I think that he fit, he's from Texas. He's in the state of Texas, preparing obviously for a playoff run with SMU, which is just weird that you can be in the portal and looking for and prepping for a national championship run potentially. That's strange, but that feels like he's going to land at either an AAC school or a Big 12 school. Devin Brown is another one to keep an eye on. Initially, I thought that Colorado was a good fit for him. I think that his experience at Ohio State obviously showed that, hey, there's just not going to be an opportunity for you here. I don't blame him for going in the portal. He is someone that I think could be really fun in some of these offenses too. The Big 12 has some really exciting offenses, which we're kind of getting back to that after a little bit of a hiatus. So it's really exciting to see that conference thrive. So Devin Brown is someone who could, I think, really have success there. And then when you looking at the group of five, there's a number of players that are looking to take that step up into Power 4 territory. So Ball State tight end Tanner Koziel already has some Big 12 visits lined up. He's a big body tight end that could fit in really nicely. I don't know where he'd fit in. First thing I thought of was Iowa State, just because it feels like Iowa State has a million 6'7" guys that are ready to catch the ball. Ben Bell out of Texas State, a very, very underrated defensive end, very productive at Texas State. He is someone that I could see being successful in the Big 12 as well. And again, already in the state of Texas, so you're kind of in that territory there. I had Connor Wegman and Cole Wisniewski written down when you initially asked me to put this list together. So that was really fun to see that they did commit to Big 12 teams. And then a former G5 guy, CJ Daniels, who's at LSU now in the portal, Chase Sewell from ECU, the wide receiver, and then North Texas wide receiver, DT Sheffield. Those are three receivers that I thought could have a future in the Big 12. I like their games. I like what they bring to the table. It's just about obviously finding the right fit and the right school to make that happen.
Joe, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on. I appreciate you taking some time for us today. Having to do this from your car on your phone, man, that is some commitment. That is, we appreciate that level of energy and effort here on the 1012 podcast. So do me a favor, Joe. You do a great job covering college football across the sport. You'll be keeping track of the transfer portal throughout the off season. So where can everybody find all the great work that you do?
Yeah, all social media, keep it simple. Just follow me at Joe Broback. It should be easy to find. And yeah, anytime you guys need me, you already know that I'm ready for it. I always love talking ball, so I'm always ready for anything you got.
If you are someone who likes to use YouTube to get your content, Joe's got a great YouTube page, got some great videos there that talks about some of these different players that are in the portal and keeping an eye on them. So go check that out as well. Joe, again, it's always a pleasure. Have a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and we'll talk to you again in 25.
Sounds good.
Hey, it's Austin James. If you're like me, trying to live your best life while living with diabetes, you can relate to worrying if you're doing a good job managing your diabetes. I use the Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor to get real-time glucose readings and see the impact of every meal and activity to make better decisions. The Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor can help me live life with diabetes on my own terms, and it gives me more time for the things I love, like being a dad and a musician. Now this is progress. Learn more at freestylelibre.us.
For prescription only. Safety info found at freestylelibre.us.
A lot of things happening across the Big 12, including at Utah, who is going through some changes this season after the year that they had, especially after the expectations they had. That's not too surprising. A few coaching changes here and there, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and a lot happening in the transfer portal, as there is with every school. And so to help break some of this down, very excited to have our good friend Joseph of Utah Utes Football Digest, our Utah show here on the 1012 Network. Joseph, welcome back to the pod, man.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Phil. Glad to be back and have really enjoyed being a part of the 1012 Network, and glad to be here.
Absolutely, man. Look, you have just been cranking out video after video after video. You have been a busy guy this last couple weeks. I mean, player breakdowns on transfer portal guys committing. You got videos about the new coaches, the wide receiver and running back. Like you have been pumping out some absolutely fantastic content for Utah fans to just be able to really dive deep onto each individual move that's going on with this football program. I mean, just looking at this offseason as a whole, obviously the season was massively disappointing, especially given preseason expectations. But as you evaluate this offseason with last season in the rear view and next season ahead of you, what are your thoughts on what Utah is doing right now?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. And that's kind of what I try to do on the channel is as a lot of instant reaction. It's funny. I had a talk with my wife the other day and I was like, hey, it's going to be a busy couple of weeks. You could feel it, in the horizon with the coaching hires, all that stuff. And then all the transfer portal that was about to hit. So I knew it was going to be a busy few days. Sorry, could you ask the question one more time?
Yeah. Just what, covering all these different changes and the players are bringing in everything. What is your view of Utah's offseason thus far and kind of what they're doing to get this program kind of back on track to expectations?
Absolutely. I think that's all going to start with the offensive coordinator and Jason Beck from New Mexico, right? I think a lot of people might see, hey, it's an offensive coordinator from New Mexico. How impressed can you really be, right? And I made a video breaking down the best offensive coordinator candidates, and he actually wasn't on there, but I made it about 3 weeks before the season ended. And by the end of the season, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but New Mexico finished with the number 2 yards per game offense in all of college football and the number 24 points per game offense in all of college football. So a super high-powered team, and they really move the ball well on offense. So I think you check that one box, even if it's that adjustment from the G5 to the Big 12 is a big adjustment, right? Like it really, there's some critical drawbacks. You're still getting an average to above average offense. And that's really how I look at it. And that's kind of worst case scenario. Like I mentioned, number 2 in yards per game in all of college football. This was one of the best offenses. And this is that stat I'm voicing is only looking at FBS opponents. So really, really high-powered team, and they did it against good talent. The other thing is we get the quarterback from New Mexico, Devin Dampier. Or Dampier, however you say it. He is electric, and I think at face value, I wasn't that excited about this guy. But you dig in deeper, like you said, Phil. I've been doing breakdowns on everyone, and you dive in on this guy. I believe it was an 89 PFF grade. This guy is an animal. And same sentiment where even if the New Mexico offensive coordinator does a decent amount worse than what he did in New Mexico, same with Dampier, where yeah, even if he does a decent amount worse than he did at New Mexico, we're still getting way better than what we had. And I made another video just referencing back to what you were saying, Phil, where I talked about the actual transfers we have leaving. I mean, we have guys that you would not want to see them leave, right? The number 1 is on defense, though, in Cameron Calhoun, our corner, who's a beast. And I'm sure some team's going to be lucky to get him if he doesn't wind up back at Utah. But our offensive exports right now are not going to be very damaging to the offense. If anything, there were guys that just you were hoping would develop into something that hadn't. So you really, like, as much as Utah has had a lot of like boom, 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 transfer out, transfer out, transfer out, you dig a little deeper behind that and things look good for Utah. I think early on, things are very promising for Utah to have a great offseason and have a great offense next year, but there's still more work to do. There's still other guys we're really hoping to get signed and hoping to close before, in the coming weeks.
I mean, yeah, like Utah lost, we talk about Isaac Wilson, but I mean, that quarterback room was empty. And so landing Dampier was obviously a big deal. One, he was one of the higher rated transfer quarterbacks in the portal for Utah to be able to pull him out to come with his OC. So that's 2 guys who already know how to communicate. Mm-hmm. They already know each other's language perfectly. And so it's somebody else, not just anybody, the quarterback who can help teach everyone else how this system goes, which is, you couldn't ask for a better piece to come with the OC than the quarterback who's going to be there. But I mean, obviously you're going to have to build some depth there as well. I mean, looking across this roster, we've had the early signing period. We're going to have a later signing period. The portal stays open for a few more weeks, but players are going to still have plenty of time to decide to which schools they want to commit to. Where do you feel like at this point Utah is really putting their focus in to kind of finish out this roster before spring ball?
I think it's got to be running back. I mean, you look at the position we still really need. Running back's definitely the big one. Not that we don't have good running backs. We have like a few okay running backs, but we're losing Mekhi Bernard to the NFL draft. Mekhi Bernard, year in and year out, has been a stud for Utah. Sad to see him go. We also lost Jalen Glover. I would say like a couple running backs would be a big deal. Depends how freshman heavy we want to have it. Just looking at the running back room right now, I think Mike Mitchell's probably our next best guy that we have right now. So it is very important. I know there's a few different guys being targeted. I don't want to, knock on wood. I have my guys I want, but I'm not going to say them. But just being honest, I will say one name I would like that I don't think Utah fans are mentioning a lot from what I'm seeing on Twitter, but Davis from New Mexico, which is same OC, same all of that. And he averaged like 7 yards a carry last year, like ridiculous numbers. And imagine that you got the running back, quarterback, and offensive coordinator. I would like that triple threat there. That'd be a position I'd really like to see us secure. One other thing just to touch on that could be a point of need that I do think we would have wanted more from last year is the edge rusher position. It wasn't bad, but I think, Utah is kind of known for having good edge rushers, and we didn't have any like really good edge rusher. We just got this kid, Jackson Jones from Oregon. I made a video on it, and the kid is awesome. The high school tape is awesome. So if he's developed a little bit, I mean, you can see why he went to Oregon. He was a stud and still is a stud. I'm excited to see his dad actually played for Utah for 2 seasons, averaged like 700 receiving yards a year. So sorry about the rant, but keep going.
No, it's good. Like to your comment of like, people probably gonna be like, man, because he's from New Mexico.
Yeah,
folks, you look at the guys who were there for the Heisman. Of the top 10 finalists for the Heisman, do you know how many of these guys started their careers at like FCS and G5 levels?
Yeah.
And are there for the Heisman. Like you do not know.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it looks better when you get a P4 guy who wants to transfer over. And yeah, if you can get a guy who started at another P4 school that was bad and come to you and he was really good there, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But a mid guy from a P4 school, just because he went there doesn't mean he's suddenly better than the star player.
Phil, I'm with you
100%.
And as an Oklahoma State fan, I'm sure you've seen this just as much as I've seen it as a Utah fan. I really follow like who we pick up and the amount of these guys that you get excited about, right? Like you kind of like trick yourself into getting really excited about these P4 didn't do much transfers. And then they come to your team and surprise, surprise, they don't do much, right? It's like, oh, he looked good out of high school and they couldn't figure it out with him. And now he's here. It's like those, for me, I don't know about you, but I'm way more excited about a guy that's done it at a high level in the G5 than a guy that hasn't done it at the P5.
No, yeah, absolutely. And look, we say this all the time. If you get a 50% hit rate on your transfer portal additions, you've had a successful transfer portal class. I mean, that is realistic. Like 50% is a successful portal class because it's just too hard because you don't know how our guys going to handle coming up to this level. How are guys going to handle coming to a new place? How are they going to fit with our system? How are they going to fit with because with high school recruiting, you're interacting with these players for honestly sometimes years. With transfer portal stuff, like it's speed dating, folks. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And like you may have done that speed date on a Zoom call. Like you may not have gotten to have that one-on-one. Now you're seeing more and more players at least book visits with schools before they commit. And I think the schools are refining and improving this process more and more. But it's still like you don't have with a lot of these guys long relationships that you've been building, even if some of those recruiting relationships are BS. But like you just don't know. Like you really don't. And so it is such a hit and miss thing. You just don't know who you're going to get. And so look, I don't ever want to complain about where a guy's coming from a transfer portal situation. Like I don't care if he can show up and be a stud for my school. I'm happy about it. Yeah. That's all I care about.
Well, just to follow up on that, Phil, I also think specifically when we're talking about running backs transferring from the G5 to the P4, sure, the defenses they're going against in the G5 are, I'd say there is a big difference. Like the offenses P4 to G5 are different for sure, but I would say for sure there's a difference in the defenses, right? Because you think about it, good players want to play offense in college. And so if you're at the G5 level and you're playing defense, it says something, right? And that's just me being just subjective about it. But I would say this, at the running back position, when you have a running back coming to P4 from a G5, yes, they'll be playing better defenses, but their offensive line is probably significantly better than what they're used to. And running back is, 90% of it is how good is your offensive line.
Oh, absolutely. All right. We know that Kyle Whittingham, as it said in the press release, I'm back. He's back for another season as the head coach at Utah. How long he's going to be back for has been, I think, a conversation.
Yeah.
I listened to Split Zone Duo, and they basically said, like, this is he signed back up for 1 year. This was he can't leave the program like this. And I think had Utah had a successful season, had he already named a coach in waiting, I have a feeling Whittingham probably would have loved to have ridden off into the sunset a Big 12 champ. But with the season going the way it did, I can absolutely understand him not wanting to leave the program to someone that he has a good relationship with in its current state. And so I'm curious on your opinion. A, thoughts on the notion that this is Whittingham's last season, and two, who do you think is actually making some of these hires? Like who's running this program? Is this Whittingham's program? Is this Whittingham is just helping Morgan Scaley kind of set things up the way he wants? Is this a two cooks in the kitchen situation? What are your thoughts on actually who is running Utah's football program right now?
Yeah, great questions. I would say with the Kyle Whittingham situation, this probably is the last year. Good or bad, amazing or terrible. This probably is the last year. If you think about it, he had to come out with a press release, like you said and say, hey, I'm coming back. That means it was probably pretty damn close to him not coming back this year. And then your question about who's making the hires and then who's, making the call and the transfer guys. I think that's kind of what you're getting at there. I've got to imagine it's both of them, right? It's if Whittingham is willing to have Morgan Scaley as the coach in waiting, and Morgan Scaley, just so you guys understand the context, Utah's coaching staff is like built in Utah, right? A lot of our guys come up through the pipeline, and Morgan Scaley has been here for a while, right? He has been, and for Utah fans, we've known he's the next coach in waiting without it being officially declared, right? You look at Utah's defense year after year, like obviously he will be next up when Witt leaves. It wouldn't make any, and he's like, he has that Utah culture, right? So we'll get a similar type of guy. And I would say, yeah, I think we're getting all the players we're getting, all the coaches we're bringing in. I think it's a mix, right? I think it's a mix of Witt's opinion, Scally's opinion, and where I think Witt has final say. But my guess would be that Witt is also giving Scally behind closed doors a final say as well, where he's like, hey, like, this is my last year. This is close to my last year. Is this the guy you want? Like, I don't want to, this is how I feel about him. Let's talk about it and, move from there.
I mean, look, I'm not a big fan of coach and waiting situations as a Big 12 fan, and most Big 12 fans have enough experience with these kinds of situations. West Virginia, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, they don't always go real well. However, you do have a different situation here. Whereas I'm not concerned with the coach and waiting in Utah for the same reasons I have been in other spots, so much as like if he'll either be a successful head coach or he won't. Mm-hmm. I don't think that has anything to do with the coach and waiting situation, because this is somebody who he's been at Utah for 17 years. He has a long history with Whittingham, and so you would think that two individuals who've worked together as well as they have for as long as they have would be able to figure out how to kind of coach this team throughout this next season and kind of build this program back up together. It is going to make for a really interesting year to see if do things look smooth or does it feel like there's two different ideologies kind of competing with this team. But I feel like you've got two guys who kind of share an ideology, so it shouldn't be as big of a deal as like you'd be concerned it might be, like it was when West Virginia had already named Dana as like the head coach in waiting there when they hired him, and it was super weird and awkward and so much fun at West Virginia.
Yeah, and I would also say I think there's some of the Morgan Scally coach in waiting situation was he probably had some real offers. I mean, like I mentioned, Utah's had one of the best defenses, even in a year where our defense had to put their team on the back game in and game out. They still, like, you look at the stats, still a pretty damn good defense. Like, still top 30, I believe. Don't quote me, but somewhere around there. And it's like if they're able to do that when they're on the field, just the whole game, basically, I think that says a lot. And I think the reason they put Scally as the coach in waiting is I would imagine Scally could get a P4 head coaching job if he wanted one.
There we go. Yeah. Joseph, man, it is always a pleasure to get you on here and talk about Utah football. Again, let everybody know where they can find. I mean, literally, I look at the page right now. 6 hours ago, 1 day 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 ago, 2 days ago, 2 days ago, 4 days ago, 7 days ago, 7 days. Like the amount of stuff that you're pumping out for Utah fans of great short videos breaking down these players who are committing, breaking down the new coaching staff members, breaking down guys to keep an eye on. Like, you are just pumping out great stuff for Utah fans who need to be subscribed to your channel. So tell everybody, where can they find your work? Where can they check it all out, man?
Yeah, I appreciate that a ton, man. And yeah, at Utah Utes Balling on Twitter, and then Utah Utes Football Digest on, really I use Facebook and Instagram a little, but follow me on Twitter. Twitter is even, follow me on YouTube. Like, Twitter is used, but if you want the full roster, it's a Twitter YouTube combo, but more YouTube. It's definitely where I'm at. And yeah, I'm trying to give you guys as much content as I can, because I was thinking about it, like, when I follow channels and I love channels, it's like, hey, if something happens, I want immediate, right? You probably think of a channel, whatever you like to do. Maybe it's outside of football. It's like, you think like something happens and within an hour they're making a video about it. So I'm doing my best. Obviously, work and stuff like that, there's only so much you could do, but within reason, I'm trying to get you guys videos as often as possible.
Again, Joseph, it's an absolute pleasure to have you in the network representing Utah Utes for us. You do a great job, man.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks, Phil.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first, like to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Oklahoma State is a team that we absolutely have to talk about, because when you go from the conference championship game to last place and then have the drama that's gone on there the past week and make massive overhaul to both your roster and your coaching staff, it seems like a program we should probably give some attention to. So joining me today for his first time here on the show, I promise it won't be the last, and it's been too long if we waited to get him here. He is Justin Southwell, host of the Locked On Pokes podcast. Justin, welcome, man.
Believe in OK State.
Believe it. Oh my God. I just said Locked On.
Good. You're good. There's a ton of shows out there.
Man,
it's a lot out there.
I'm sorry. This is what happens. You're going at 3:30 in the afternoon on a Thursday.
I'm telling you, it's the combination of everything else going on. There's too much to keep up with. Let's be honest.
Tracking 16 teams and everything in the offseason is just,
you can't.
Tracking Oklahoma State alone is a full-time job with everything going on there. Everything going on there. Okay. Thank you. So, yes, you're part of the Believe Network, not the Locked On Network. I'm so sorry. Okay. Justin's never coming back again. So, Justin, look, we've had weird points with Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State ever since he was hired. Obviously, you've had the high highs of 2011 and 2021. You've had the low lows of 2014, I think 2020 in the offseason there. Oklahoma State goes through its first losing season since its first year in Stillwater. They go winless in Big 12 play for the first time since, I believe, 1994. This was definitely a year that you can easily call it one of the most disappointing years in Oklahoma State football history. It not just because of what the record was, but because of the expectations on this season, because of everything they brought back. And to see it go the way it did is mind-boggling. Look, this is the Big 12. We are used to mind-boggling in this conference. We are used to good luck figuring out what's going to happen in this conference. But Oklahoma State's just been such a consistent program. To see it bottom out in the way that it did this year, I think is almost as shocking, if not more so, than seeing Arizona State go from picked 16th in the preseason to winning the whole thing. How do you think that we got here? Is this a blip that maybe there is a massive overreaction to, or do you think that steps have been made along the way that have kind of built up to what was the 2024 Oklahoma State season?
And that's a great question. And from the outside looking in, how do you begin to evaluate that, right? It's kind of like, you would think with the resources and everybody returning, that Oklahoma State is sure to be at least a top 3 team. I saw in the preseason rankings, Oklahoma State's picked 3rd in the Big 12, and I was kind of offended. Like everybody coming back and you got them at third. That's wild. But yeah, the way that everything unfolded and what was a little bit more bizarre was I think injuries obviously played a part in it, but it seemed to me that it wasn't in the same way that injuries completely devastated that 2022 squad. I mean, they fell off the latter half of that season. It just kind of seemed to be maybe one after another, but it didn't have the same compounding effect because you always thought Ollie Gordon's still back there. He has a chance to turn it up. You still have Brennan Presley out there. He can be a game breaker himself. But yeah, just the dynamics of that season, I don't know, man. It was just bizarre to see. But I think it is probably just a blip. I wouldn't say that fans or anybody's necessarily overreacting to the situation based on the expectations, but it is by far the most disappointing season that I've ever seen as an Oklahoma State fan.
I don't know if we want to call it Mexican standoff that occurred between Mike Gundy and the Board of Regents at Oklahoma State, in which there was probably a good 24-hour period where no one knew if Mike Gundy would still be the head coach of Oklahoma State. Because it kind of went back and forth, and of course you had plenty of people on social media who have all sorts of sources that were just positive of what was or wasn't going to happen. He's agreed to a new contract, smaller buyout. There's, according to different people, including Carson Cunningham, there's some restrictions put on him as far as how he's going about hiring, and we'll talk about some of these news hires here in a minute. The vibes around Oklahoma State right now don't feel good. Like you would think your head coach is coming back, and they've agreed to something new that feels a little more team friendly and is designed to be beneficial to everyone. You'd think that would be good, but it's so hard to feel confident right now, despite Mike Gundy coming back and despite this being a 1-year thing. I mean, again, the previous season, Oklahoma State's in Arlington facing Texas for a Big 12 championship game. They've won 10 seasons again, and yet here we are, and I as an Oklahoma State fan, I'm not sure I felt as low now during the Gundy era, except for maybe 2014 before the Bedlam win. Like this, I mean, I can't think of another point during his tenure where things seemed this bad.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And that's the beautiful thing about Bedlam. If you win that game, a lot of that stuff kind of goes away. And whenever you follow it up with a 10-win season in 2015, that certainly helps as well. But yeah, the way that I think Nathan described it probably the best that I've heard on our podcast. Nathan Gilslider said something to the effect of, I'm probably going to get the quote wrong, but trust is gathered in raindrops and lost in buckets. It's kind of like over the years, you trust Gundy that what he's been doing has been excellent. You've seen these wins, 10 win seasons over the course of his 20-year career at Oklahoma State. You give him the benefit of the doubt a lot of times because through the midst of changes, he's still able to produce at an incredible clip. And sure, you don't see necessarily the Big 12 championships that you'd want to see, or maybe the Bedlam wins across those years that you'd like to see for somebody as legendary as a head coach of Mike Gundy. But man, he just kicked the bucket over. There's no trust right now. And I think that that's the reason why we feel that way, because you'd like to be able to have trust that your head coach knows what he's doing, is making the right hires. You have trust in the offseason that changes are going to be made. And as we're seeing now, it's a lot of maybe overreactions to some of the changes that are being made with the new offensive and defensive coordinator hires. And the hardest part right now is I don't know if you can confidently trust Gundy because of the situation that we're in. It's kind of do or die. You felt like it was do or die after a couple of games that we had lost, and he just kept losing games. So I think that that's where we're in this position now, because this is what we're seeing.
Look, Gundy has done a good job of hiring over the years. Absolutely. And he pulled offensive, defensive coordinators from all over the place, and some have been more successful than others. But he's always been able to kind of do things his way, and it's worked. Mike Yurcich was awesome at Oklahoma State, pulled him from D2. Jim Knowles was the DC at Duke, wasn't even on the other ones. Radar comes in, puts in a top 5 defense nationally in one year, now is doing a great job at Ohio State. Dana Holgerson and Todd Monken, and this just has brought in people left, right, and sideways. Even Bill Young during his time as defensive coordinator, like he has had success finding coordinators. It is so interesting to see him in the latter years here, and I think this is similar to a lot of coaches who have been in a place for a long time, where you start to see some similarities between. I'm not going to call it laziness, and I'm not going to call it a lack of desire to make change, but you start to see certain levels of comfort of these are the people that I want. And whereas before you felt more confident in him in making changes when things got bad, as has been pointed out on social multiple times, that you had an offensive coordinator who, during his tenure, produced some of the worst offenses of the Gundy time. And so to get to a point now where you're having to make, you're basically being forced to make these hires because things got so bad. I do kind of question the trust in Gundy of, look, you found ways to have success. You absolutely have. And depending upon what lens you want to look through, you can either attribute that to Gundy and his decision-making before this year for the past few years, or you can find ways to not give him credit and attribute it to other people or other things. And so it is interesting with Gundy right now of you just feel very divided in the fan base of either those that are very still pro Gundy and everything is great and nothing's wrong, and those who are very, maybe we should have just gone ahead and let him go with some of these decisions that are being made. Where do you feel like you kind of fall in there?
Well, I've always been a Gundy fan, so I'll preface by that. Even before I played at Oklahoma State, I was a Gundy fan. I was excited to be on his roster, and I think this is the lowest that I've been in my feelings toward Mike Gundy, and a lot of it I think does come down to maybe the desire not to change, because we saw with, like you just mentioned, Coach Dunn, he was my receivers coach. Love the guy, but his ability to be an offensive coordinator, I mean, we had 5 years of work, and I think maybe Gundy tries to justify it by saying, we went to the Fiesta Bowl and won in 2021. We went to a Big 12 championship in 2023. Like, we're producing. But if you look back at those years, our defense was phenomenal in 2021, and that's essentially what won us so many games, and arguably that Fiesta Bowl against Notre Dame. 2023, it just happened to be that Ollie Gordon arose on the scene, and nobody was really expecting that. You had that change in the zone versus gap scheme on the offensive line, and it gave defensive coordinators fits trying to figure out how to stop that and to try to stop Ollie Gordon. And then they figured that out. So it becomes, how do you adjust? How do you change things up? And there were flashes of brilliance from Coach Dunn at times, but there was never any consistency of that, and the lack of creativity. And one of the things that hurt me so much was the interviews that you heard from South Alabama Jaguars after that game in 2023. The defensive guys were saying we could just line up and knew exactly where they were going to go because we had seen it on film. And we know how, that's kind of the thing, but it's been so vanilla. And Gundy's unwillingness to move on from Coach Dunn has gotten to me the most of why I'm so down on him, because you have to have a desire to continue to get better and to try to continue to elevate the program to win that Big 12 championship, to get to the college football playoff. And I think from what we had seen, it wasn't necessarily working out because of Dunn. It was like defense. We had kind of a flash in the pan with Ollie Gordon, and I think you can tell now, looking back, I don't think he really wanted to move on from Dunn, even after all the stuff that happened this season, because Dunn got let go and there's a waiting period trying to figure out who the offensive coordinator is. And now we've come to find out that's going to be Doug Meacham. And I don't necessarily know if that's Gundy's first choice or what, but to me, that just kind of indicates he probably wasn't ready to move on from Dunn. I think he was ready to just stick with it, see where it goes.
Yeah, firing your former receivers coach Turdosi, and hiring a former receivers coach who has had varying levels of success as an OC at different places, all in the Big 12, funny enough, is a move that I think a lot of people were a little not so excited about, given some of the names that had been attached to this job, or at least that fans were very hopeful of. You saw Craddock at Tulane. I was big on the OC down in North Texas. There was some who talked about, obviously, Brennan Marion. I never thought that was a reality because I couldn't imagine Gundy bringing somebody in and letting them run a go-go offense that seemed very Mike Gundy, especially in 2024. I just kind of look at things with Gundy right now, and I forget what podcast I listened to some time back, and they made a point that I've always stuck out to me as to one of the reasons I think Mike Gundy is one of the best college football coaches of all time. And it's good coaches have success. Great coaches have eras. They have periods of their coaching tenure where they are willing to, where they make changes or adapt to how things are changing around them. And you saw Gundy be a high-powered offense, bend don't break defense kind of coach. And then over the years, he shifted to being more defensive focused. And you get the 20. I mean, I don't think you could have two more different teams under one coach than 2011 Oklahoma State and 2021 Oklahoma State, both under Mike Gundy. And so my thing for Gundy here is, look, there's no question that belongs in College Football Hall of Fame, name in the Ring of Honor, statue outside Boone Pickens Stadium. But I do wonder if his legacy, to some extent, is kind of up in the air right now, depending upon how the end comes, because the end comes for us all. And as the great line is, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And I'm really curious if Gundy is about to find a third era and a time in which he can reestablish who he is and go out on top, or if we are just kind of seeing like the end of Gary Patterson at TCU or any great coach in any school that was there for some time, where you're going to leave more with a whimper than with gusto.
Yeah, time will tell. And as it appears right now, he's saying some of the right things as far as, I'm the guy that can turn it around. I know what I'm doing. We've got all this experience to be able to do that. But again, do you trust him at this point in time? I think for the majority of the fan base, the answer to that question is no. But he has, in my opinion, earned the right to be able to have that opportunity to try to get to that point. And because of that, I'm glad that he's still our coach. And there's just now some unknown as far as how much longer is he going to be the coach? How quickly can he turn it around? How high can he elevate the program again in an era that is kind of becoming a little bit more out of his wheelhouse, as far as he's kind of an old school coach? And can he thrive in the NIL era? And he's going to have to adapt. It's that adapt or die situation. And I hope he can adapt, because I'd love to see him go out on top. But I think we know what we have with Coach Gundy at this point. I'm not expecting any major turnaround to see him necessarily win a Big 12 championship or a spot in the college football playoff, or maybe even a playoff win. I would love to see it. I think it is possible. But at this point, I'm not really going to expect that. So is that good for OSU, or is that bad for OSU? How badly do they want that? How much are they willing to move on from Gundy if the time comes, whether that's at the end of this year if it's 2 years from now, you have to be prepared to move on from Gundy at one point or another. He's absolutely a legend. We're going to look back on his time here fondly. And, he'll write history over the next couple of years as far as what his legacy looks like.
And yeah, you'd love to see him leave it better than he found it. And he found it in pretty good condition, and he's built it up into something. And no matter when he leaves, I do think it's better than it was when he took over.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Wholeheartedly believe that. And I do think it's, you look at Saban retiring, and Saban's like 10 years older than Gundy. So Gundy's still, from a coaching standpoint, he's still fairly young. But these changes that continue to happen, and they haven't stopped. The only constant right now in college athletics is change as we look towards the House settlement and players becoming employees, being paid by schools, probably eventually. Like, does he want to continue to try and succeed in an era where this is not what he grew up in? It's not what he came up coaching in. It's not what he was a head coach in for most of his tenure. And I think a lot of head coaches need to start asking themselves that question. It's hard. Like, when you're that confident and stubborn in a good way, I think. Stubbornness can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. But do you really want to do that, or are you just fighting against the wind, thinking you might beat it back?
I don't know how much he's had a desire to ever coach in the NFL, but you got to think that's probably crossed his mind a time or two. And then you look at Oklahoma State and you just kind of consider everything around it. This is probably his Yankees job. You really want to leave that for another job? I know you flirted with some other universities at a time. You want to go to the NFL? The way that the college football landscape is shaping, it could very much turn into a smaller version of the NFL. And I think that could, if he has the right mindset about it, revitalize his love for this side of things, where initially you look at it and it's like, this isn't college football. I'm not about that. I'm old school. I want to look at it this way. But in another way, you can look at it like, I'm going to turn this into an NFL program, and I'm going to be the guy that does that. And I think if he does have that kind of mindset and is willing to accept that challenge, I wouldn't put it past him. I think that he has the ability, the skill set to be able to make that work.
I think you're right on that nod. I will say, when he does retire, Fox Sports would do well to hire him and have him talking ball on the desk. As you mentioned, Doug Meacham back as OC, this time as OC at Oklahoma State. Todd Grantham, former Florida, Mississippi State defensive coordinator, who's been in the NFL for a couple of years as defensive line coach, is going to be the new DC. We've seen some position coach changes on the defense so far at defensive line and linebackers. Just general thoughts at this point of these hires that Gundy has made.
Whenever you initially look at them, I'll be honest, they seem a little bit underwhelming. But again, I'm still one to give Gundy the benefit of the doubt. I still trust him, and I think that he knows what he's doing. You rattled off all the names that he's had for coordinator hires in the past. Sure, there have been some that have flopped too. If you can look back at Dunn, Gleason, and it's just kind of like, this is the chance to turn it around. And just looking at the names, looking at the statistics, nothing necessarily jumps out. Oklahoma State, we've built up the program. You'd think that you'd be able to go out and get some top guys from the portal, get the top coaches, and that just hasn't been the case. And I don't know if that's limiting our ability, it's keeping us, holding us back, or if we're maybe succeeding in spite of some of that. But I'm in the Believe in OK State podcast, so I'm going to continue to believe in OK State. And that includes the coordinators, right? It includes everybody in the organization. I think that they take the job. They're taking the job at Oklahoma State because they want to be here. And I think that does play a big factor in things. Not everybody is at a place that they love working at. They come to work every day loving what they do. I think Meacham can do that. Like if you were to ask me if I wanted to work for Mike Gundy or Sonny Dykes, I mean, I'm going to choose Mike Gundy. So I think that could enable him to do well for Oklahoma State, essentially, is what I'm getting at.
No, Meacham did a great job at Oklahoma State when he was there. He obviously left for an OC job. He bounced around a few places, and Oklahoma State's had an incredible wide receiver coach in Casey Dunn. They haven't needed Doug Meacham's services in quite some time. So it will be interesting to see how this coaching staff continues to shake out. I highly doubt that we are done seeing. Obviously, you have your coordinators, but I doubt we are done seeing position coaches changed out in Stillwater. Look, it is December 12th. While we are talking about this, the first bowl game hasn't even kicked off. So I have a realistic expectation of an answer here, but understanding what changes have been made, seeing the names who have entered the portal, knowing the names that are entering the NFL draft, understanding that not just are you replacing a lot of the staff, you're going to replace most of this roster as well. How do you, as an Oklahoma State fan, enter the off season and start trying to mentally prepare yourself for next year? Or are you just like, nah, Steve Lutz has us off to a nice start. The softball schedule just dropped. I'm not even going to worry about football again until the Women's College World Series has wrapped up and the Cowgirls are back home.
That's a great point. As much as I love football, I take option B as my mindset. I want to enjoy all Oklahoma State athletics in season. And you're right. Lutz is off to a hot start. David Taylor for wrestling, got baseball, softball, everything. OSU has such a great athletic department. It's a shame that football has dropped off recently, but the football off season is so long, and I've lived it where that's just your life every day, football. And I'm still at the point where I'm good taking a break and enjoying other sports. So yeah, for me, I'm just kind of like, I'll follow all the moves that are being made in the off season, but it ultimately doesn't matter until they step on the field again in late August, early September, whenever the case is. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be probably a mess. It'll look like a mess from the outside, and just know they're working for that opportunity next fall. From this point until next fall, like, so much work goes into it. And that's the kind of stuff that, people don't necessarily like to, it's the same stuff over and over again. So there's not much to talk about. You don't see the progress until you see it on the field. And, as a fan, I'm still going to just defer to trusting that Gundy knows what he's doing. Coordinators know what they're doing. They're bringing in the players that they would, hopefully get some good players that can make some plays. And, just trust the process, I guess, as overused as that analogy is in sports these days.
I appreciate you mentioning David Taylor. As soon as I stopped talking, I realized I forgot,
Great he's just
first
crushing
season.
it,
yeah, absolutely. Look, there's plenty of things to be distracted by and excited for at Oklahoma State as a Cowboy and Cowgirl fan. So trust me, I'm already like, oh yes, the Cowgirls are coming to Conway, Arkansas in February. Let me go ahead and start planning out that Saturday trip so I can go watch them play 2 games. So very excited about that. Justin, thank you so much for joining us today, man. You've been awesome. It is the Believe in Oklahoma State podcast. I'm sorry.
It's all good. And I'm saying, man, Locked On, good stuff. Pistols Firing, good stuff. We got a ton of great podcasts out there. So if you go listen to that, I'm not going to be offended at all. Man, it's good. We're good. I've been a guest on their podcast too. So it's all fun.
There was a period there of like, it was Pistols Firing, and that was like it. Like all other shows had gone away for some reason. And then we have Pistols, we have you guys, we have Kate and Dustin when they're back off of break, what feels like 45. We have Locked On. Like we have this really nice, we've back to having this nice strong collection of Oklahoma State podcasts. So it's I'm serious. You guys do a great job. I'm always thrilled to listen to the show when I can. So everybody, Oklahoma State fans, if you don't know about Justin's show by now. I don't know how. I mean, you're also one of the OSU social follows. I don't know if you know that, but it feels that way.
Man, it's been that's a completely different aspect. It's really interesting to me, and I love all of the. They're not. Are they burner accounts technically?
I guess so.
They're
Sure.
just anonymous accounts, right? So you
Right.
have the accounts that they have a Pistol Pete type of image as their profile pic, and you don't know who they are behind the scenes, like behind the Twitter desk, and that's an interesting aspect of it. But I'm just gonna be me, and that's not always the most popular thing because I have a filter on. I'm not gonna just go out and say some crazy hot takes or anything like that. But I think that's for the best. Unfortunately, it doesn't lead to always like the most likes, retweets, followers, and all that stuff. But if you do follow me, I'll try to interact with people on there, and I do appreciate that. So,
all right, Justin, appreciate it, man. This is not your last time here, unless you're just like, no, you called me the wrong name. But
nah,
appreciate it, bud.
absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the vehicle owner's manual for important feature limitations and information.
Joining now is Justin Hiles, 1/2 or 1/3. I don't know. You guys go through. You see, the hosts of Viva La Cat seem to change, but Justin Hiles, one part of our Cincinnati podcast here in the 1012 Network, joining us now. Justin, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you very much. Always glad to be on.
I appreciate you being here. I wish I had you here for I guess a better conversation, but we got to talk a little Bearcat football. Because while you still have your head coach, unlike some of the programs that we're kind of reviewing as we head into the new year, not exactly what I would call a successful season for Cincinnati. Really strong start, get to 5-2, and then 5-game win streak to end it out. Miss a bowl game for the second straight year under Satterfield. Just help me understand what happened to the Bearcats in the back half of this schedule, because it's not that the schedule was like, you don't look at it and go like, oh no, they had to play Colorado and Arizona State and Kansas. Like it wasn't the most daunting of back half schedules. So for them to end on a 5-game losing streak is, I think, even more disappointing than just the fact that they did.
Well, I mean, I contrary almost to what you said, though, is like that was actually a little bit of the streak. It was Arizona State, we had Colorado, we had Kansas State, we had Iowa State, and then finished out with TCU, who is a good team too. We talked about it all off season going into this season. It was going to be a thing where you were going to try to bowl by the time you get done with Boulder. By the time you were through that part of the season, you're 8 games in, you want to be bowling. And that seemed like a very achievable goal. You got 2 chances to slip up, gives you a lot of opportunity. And they did just that. Like they did everything right up until that game. And I think, unfortunately, what ended up happening is the pieces and problems, in the same way that we saw last year, the pieces and problems that were prevalent in week 1, week 2, week 3 were prevalent in weeks 10, 11, 12. And, it's not that this team can't get over the hump. It's just that they show progress, but then those just, I don't even know, those just core issues that cannot be resolved continue to show up week in, week out. And it's special teams one week. It's some part of our defense. It's part of our, safeties and our corners. Like every single week, there's some little element that always ends up being that thing that really just doesn't get going. And I feel like, unfortunately, it's part of the Satterfield identity. Like there's just going to be something that's not going to get resolved. And you're always going to have that one nagging thing. And there's not really been one singular win other than maybe Houston this year, where you look at and you're like, wow, like that was the Satterfield special. Like that was everything that we could possibly have done right in a game. So it's just that back half slide. And I think a lot of it's attributed to schedule. And I think a lot of people, I'll say this much too, people looked at the strength of schedule at the beginning of the season. It was rated as the worst schedule in the Big 12. It was the worst SOS in the entire Big 12. Get to the end of the season, nobody expected Arizona State, who we beat. Nobody expected Kansas State to be, or people expected Kansas State, but they were more consistent. Iowa State was just as good. Colorado, people weren't expecting to be as good as they were, and they're good. So it's those teams, I think in that stretch, unfortunately, just get the better of you, and it's a stronger SOS than originally appeared on paper.
Which is, for those listening, welcome to the Big 12. Like I was hoping everyone had learned that the previous year, last season, because we had this conversation around West Virginia was ranked as the easiest, as the most difficult schedule, and then it wasn't, right? And but West Virginia fans wanted to, you guys said it was a hard schedule, but it wasn't. And so, because we just don't know, and because the Big 12 is the Big 12 and it's all topsy-turvy, preseason expectations and preseason schedule strength is just, it's as good as we can get it, but it's not going to be accurate. No, it is fair. Arizona State, Colorado, West Virginia, Iowa State, Kansas State, TCU. You get the win over Arizona State. Granted, without their starting quarterback.
Yep.
I think what's most disappointing to me is the fact that you got a West Virginia team at home that's, I'm going to use the air quotes because every time I say this, West Virginia fans get all up in the mentions, not a rivalry, that you guys drop at home. It's a West Virginia team that has fired their head coach. And you close out with a TCU team who has been good and has gotten better as the season goes on, but isn't like great. And so two opportunities at home. Like no one was expecting you to go to Kansas State and go to Iowa State and win those games.
Right.
And not really with Boulder with the way Colorado played this season. But two home games against middle of the pack teams looked like an opportunity for an improved Cincinnati team, an improved team with a much better quarterback play with Brendan Sorsby, even though Brendan Sorsby was significantly better, but also had just absolutely mind-numbingly back-breaking mistakes in games. It felt like they should have been able to get one of those two. And by the time we got to the TCU game, and I know it was a 7-point game, but the longer that game went on, the less it was like, no, Cincinnati's still in this. And more like, are they just ready to be done? Like, is this season just like, do they care about getting that 6th win? Is this fact that they're on a 4-game losing streak and they're struggling here with TCU? Does this team just kind of been like, all right, we're good?
Yep. Yeah. I think we asked this question to fans, which is, this is a question that you never want to pose. And that's just how you know how bleak it is. But it's, what would you rather see at the end of the year? Would you rather see Sack get canned, which with a loss in that game, unfortunately for that crowd, still was never going to happen because of the buyout, because of the length of the contract and everything. Like, it's, the guy's not going anywhere. However, with that situation in that game, you look at the Pitt game, you look at the West Virginia game, you look at the Colorado game, there's so many different situations where this team, I think, has just, like I said, there's always been one thing that's wrong every game, but there's also always one play where it's starting to become, it feels like a curse, where you'll see this one play happen on the field, or this one drive will get shut down, and you're like, oh, it's the middle of the second quarter, this game's over. Like, it might be a 7-point game, but you're like, based on the way that momentum shifts, based on the way that game is going, that game's done. And we've seen it in so many games. I think the Texas Tech one, they played their hearts out until the end, and they did a really good job trying to finish out there. But there's been so many games throughout the season where you just feel that momentum switch. You feel like the lights turned off and somebody left the room, and it's like, and now we're just in the waiting period for this game to hit zeros in the fourth quarter. That's a really bleak way of looking at it, but I think that's been a lot of this season. And then, of course, like you said, you get to the TCU game, goes down to the end. There's like a Hail Mary pass at the end of the game. There's weird clock management. There's all these different things going on. There's never one game this season where you're just like, other than Houston, and maybe Towson, which I'm not even going to count, that you look at and say, they put the pedal down and there was no question they were winning that game. And I think that's going to continue to be the case.
What is Satterfield's buyout?
A lot. It's a lot. I want to say.
I'm trying to find it, and I can't. Everything I pull up's like telling me what it was.
I think it's like $8 million.
Okay, here we go.
It changes obviously throughout the seasons too.
Correct. But that's still, I think 8 million is what I'm seeing. Okay, so which isn't. It's an $8 million buyout in December. $4 million in 25.
Yep.
Which is far more stomachable than even 8. Not that bad. I have seen, and forgive me if I've just missed it, I've seen nothing out of Cincinnati as far as coordinator changes, staff changes. And we haven't seen a mass exodus to the portal so far. There's some differentiation between 247, which has like 7-8 players. Someone hit us up on X on the 1012 account that showed a larger number, though I think some of those are walk-ons. But it doesn't feel like the vibes are, I don't know, bad in the program. What is UC athletic department? What is the coaching staff like? What are they saying right now? What is coming out of Cincinnati in regards to this football program right now?
Nothing.
It's in that. Okay, so it's not just me.
Like we're kind of in the dark. I'll say this much: we've already seen a few players put their names in the portal. Typically at this point in the season, especially when it's like fresh out, it's either going to be your absolute best players or it's going to be the guys that are riding the bench. We've seen a few of the bench players already into the portal. We've seen some other, guys who've been getting some reps into the portal. I'll say this much. This past week, we had Sorsby and Corleone, who it's your best offensive player and your quarterback and the staple keystone of this program. And then you have your best defensive player and the staple keystone of your defensive side of the program. Both of them have announced that they're returning. So it's kind of one of those things where it's tough because you saw this last year and you're seeing it again this year, where there's some identity in the fact that people are buying into Satterfield. Players are buying into Satterfield more so than the fans. And I think you want to see that. And I think you want to see that in any program. If you have a mass exodus where it's like you got 20, 30 guys in the portal, I mean, we know what that looks like. We know what portal day looks like as Bearcats fans, because it happened in 21 with Brandon. When Brandon, we hit the end of the conference championship game in basketball, lost to Houston, walked off the court. Next thing you know, 7 guys out of a 14, 15 man roster hit the portal within 48 hours. Many of them your best players. And so like, we know what that feels like. And I think like, it doesn't feel like it's quite, we're screwed yet, but it also doesn't feel like we're necessarily trending up, which has been the Satterfield mantra. That was what he said right after the season. It's like, this team is trending up. It's going in the right direction. I think there's belief in the reason that you could see that, but I also don't blame anybody who looks at it with a very pessimistic point of view. It says, sure, you won 2 more games, but all the reasons that you lost these games were the same thing as last year. And so how does this team get better? How does this team improve? It's all going to be relying on the portal and recruiting. We've got guys getting flipped left and right out of this program. We're flipping, MAC players. We're flipping, maybe a Sunbelt player here or there, or some D2 FCS kind of player, but we're not flipping other Power 4 players to come to Cincinnati. Our guys are getting flipped to go play at, a Florida or go play at like a Louisville or things like that. And it's muddy right now. It's really muddy, and it's hard to really figure out exactly how you can feel about this program going forward.
I think I saw 247 had Cincinnati's got the lowest rated signing class from early signing period in the Big 12.
Yep.
So that's not ideal. Nope. Obviously, you got a very quiet athletic department who's not saying much. You're not seeing any changes to a team that, if they're trying to sell you on, we won 2 more games. Looking at looking ahead to next year, as you mentioned, Sorsby back, I think that's big. Having another year, having had a full year in the program and seeing what he was able to achieve this year, which was exceeded expectations. I'm not going to suddenly start heaping on more expectations that he's going to take some giant leap, but you would like to see him continue to improve on the mistakes that he made this year. Because I think some of those, you take away 2 or 3 of the egregious errors he had this year, and you're going bowling.
That's two. Yeah, I think it's 2 or 3 wins.
Yeah,
in some of the games.
At least 2 wins.
Unfortunately,
yeah. Like honestly, like you're beating West Virginia. If he doesn't make the what just happened play against West Virginia, that interception, I think Cincinnati is winning that game. Mm-hmm. And so, actually, there's a couple of really turnovers that cost him that one. So I think Cincinnati is going bowling. So I think you can, if you want to be optimistic and look at, you can see key points where you say, if this 1, 2, 3 things went different, this team's got 6, 7 wins and go into a bowl game this year. And we're having a different conversation about a 2-game jump versus a 4-game jump from last year.
Yep.
We're starting to feel some good vibes. So I can get and be sold on, we aren't as far away as the record might indicate. Mm-hmm. So looking to next season, non-conference of Nebraska and Indianapolis, Bowling Green, Northwestern State for your FCS game. Again, we don't know who's going to be good and who's not, but we've got Arizona, BYU, Baylor, Iowa State, UCF at home. Road games at Kansas, Oklahoma State, TCU, and Utah. Utah is going to look very different. TCU should look somewhat similar. OSU is going to look totally different. Kansas and Jaden Daniels back. And I hate to do schedule rundown in December of the year before.
That's what we're here for.
That's what everybody wants. But I mean, just looking at all of this and what they have back, like what are realistic expectations for Satterfield for next year? What does he have to do to be back for year 4? And let's go with this, because there's fan expectation to me, and there's based off the way the athletic department seems to be handling things. I wonder if those are different expectations.
They're going to be different expectations. I can tell you that much, but I can tell you from what I gather from just the whole vibe around Cincinnati in general is this year's goal was to go bowling. It's like, you had a 3-9 year. Now you're at 5-7. You're 1 game away. Some of these you're 1 play away from going bowling, and the conversation's very different. I think even if you go bowling, even if you manage to beat maybe say West Virginia, you look at some of the other games, and you're like, we fell short of expectations, but we feel good. We feel okay. And I can see the light at the end of the tunnel for Satterfield. I think this year it is, and I firmly believe this, just the strength of schedule does not look like it's not standing out in some crazy fashion. A lot of the shifts have happened, like Oklahoma State was supposed to be a power hitter this year. Utah was supposed to be a power hitter this year. Bottom of the conference. Sorry, Phil. But like you have teams that had these super lofty expectations and then did quite the opposite. Arizona State was supposed to be dead last and was the best. So it's like you have these complete flip and turnover of the Big 12, and you're trying to see where things change. And I think for Cincinnati, they're just kind of stuck in this no man's land. So realistically for next year, looking at the schedule, looking at how all these teams have shook out, you would hope and expect that they go bowling. Like it's the same thing as last year. For this year, they have to go bowling. I would say even so, like if you won 2 more games this year, win 2 more games next year, go to 7. I think Satterfield's still going to be on this hot seat as long as he remains under 7 games next year. If he hits 7, people will see there's progress. There's a clear path. But a lot of that comes down to not only what games are you losing, what games are you winning, but how did you win? How did you lose? How did these games come out? How did these storylines that shifted where, like I said, I think I personally am giving him a little bit of saving grace in a way that I don't feel internally, but when I look at the numbers and I look at everything else and I look at how the conference shook out, I'm giving him more leeway than I actually feel. Like I'm not on the Satterfield train, but looking at the strength of the schedule and where these teams ended up, it was a tough back half. We knew it was going to be, and it actually ended up being an even tougher back half than we expected. So I give him some grace for that. But looking at next year, if you have not shown that this thing can get over the hump in the new conference, you don't want to be left behind, because with all this conference realignment, they're going to shake out. Some guys are going to float to the top. Some programs are going to shimmy to the bottom. And if we settle all the way to the bottom, it can be really hard to climb out of that, even with the portal, even with all the, new forms of getting players in and flipping programs around like that. It can happen really fast, but it can still be really hard to dig out of that hole. And I don't want this program to continue to fall down from where it was just because there was a conference shift. We understand their strength of schedule. We understand all these things, but Satterfield's still going to be on that hot seat. And I think realistically, if he does not achieve 6 wins next year, he's gone.
I'll say this: when the AD in charge is the guy that hired you, and they made such a big buzz about getting you and snatching you away from another Power 4 job,
that was going to fire him.
I fear. No. Look, I am not a pro Satterfield guy, and there were Cincinnati fans who were aware of that and tried to come at me after the 5-2 start, and here we are.
Yep.
I get the feeling that the athletic department is going to be more lenient of him than fans are. So unless there is a full-blown fan revolt, like 6-6 probably keeps him his job after year 3, which, I mean, I'd be done with him now, but I also understand, you're not going to let a guy go or fire a guy after 2 years unless it just hit rock bottom. So I'm not sure his seat's quite as hot entering next year as I would like it to be, and I don't like firing coaches, and as a lot of Cincinnati fans probably would like it to be. So it's definitely going to be one of the Big 12 schools to keep a very close eye on next season. And by the way, please go beat Nebraska in week 1. That would be a nice thing.
We would love to.
Absolutely, Justin. Appreciate it, man.
Beat them in Nippert.
I mean, look, just a W is a W. Okay, Big 12 needs all the wins it can get in non-con against SEC and Big 10 opponents, no matter how good or bad they are. Justin, like we said, you are one of the hosts of the Viva La Cats podcast. Where can everybody find the show and the work that you guys do covering Cincinnati?
Yeah, of course. You can find us at Viva La Cats Pod on Twitter, X, whatever you like to call it, as well as Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts as well. We try to put up some clips every once in a while. So be on the lookout for us there. And as well, Spotify, Apple Pods, and anywhere you listen, we're there.
We got to get you guys on the Bluesky bandwagon, man. It's time to.
So many apps.
I know. Trust
got to strip the wood bare. Got to start from the foundation. It's tough.
Justin, you guys, the Cincinnati men's basketball team is pretty good, so you guys enjoy watching the Bearcats play some hoops, and we'll talk to you again in the new year.
Sounds good. Thank you all.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.